Senator Deery, thanks for joining us. You posted earlier this week that 2 days after the Indiana Recount Commission invalidated 8 votes, Commissioner Paul Mullen publicly detailed his close friendship with Senator Jim Banks at an Indianapolis public event. And you went on to say the connections do not end there. The director selected to oversee the recount challenge was a former employee. And you said those entanglements raise serious questions about transparency and objectivity. Can you expand on that? Is that part of your appeal?
Yeah, well, I don't want to overemphasize the point because the most important thing is that there are voters whose voices were silenced because of this. But I do think it's important for the public to understand the process and at different levels of the process where there's objectivity and where there's not. Round one, the counties count the vote, and then the State Board of Accounts comes in and recounts the votes. That's an objective process, and they determined that I had received more votes than the alternative. But then it goes to round two, which is more of a political process where you have political appointees that are determining whether any of those ballots should be invalidated. And I thought it was important to call out that the panel that was looking at was not without conflicts, and that has been some lack of transparency around some of that as well. So I thought it was important to emphasize that. But we're not done yet. Now we'll go to round three, which will go to the courts, which is a more of an objective view, and we'll see what they have to say of whether they acted lawfully in invalidating those.
At the end of the day, are you arguing here that a clerical error, a mistake by
Mhm.
a, a government employee, perhaps, for example, should not invalidate someone's vote? Is that kind of the crux of a part of your argument?
That's exactly right. And it's not just my argument. That's what Indiana law has said and how it's been interpreted in the past is that a vote should not be disqualified for the sole reason that a poll worker made an error. But it's important to know what we're talking about with the scenarios. And so I'll walk you through some of them. I mean, for example, people sometimes think we're just talking about, like a mysterious absentee ballot that shows up in the dumpster or something like that. That's not what we're talking about. There are votes that people that voted in person in early voting. So let's say, for example, you plan to vote. You can't vote on Tuesday because you're working. So you go down to your county office and vote on Saturday. You show them your ID. You sign in. Everything's valid. They print off the ballot, you turn it in, and you think everything's fine, you've done your civic duty. But a volunteer there failed to put a stamp on that ballot, and now they're saying that it should be invalidated because you did nothing wrong. It was simply the volunteers there or the clerk there that did it wrong. Now, that's votes were disqualified for that reason, enough to change the election just because somebody made an error in that. You voted in person, and that's not right. And it actually also really introduces a lot of other new concerns for anybody concerned about voter fraud or election integrity. If this is going to be the new standard, now what happens when somebody shows up that maybe they're wearing a "Don't Tread on Me" hat that the poll worker doesn't like, or they've got a tattoo or a skin color or they're from a precinct that the person doesn't like. Yeah, maybe I'll just actually forget to stamp this one. We don't want to go down that path, and that's why I think that our appeal will be strong.
But don't election workers have to follow the rules? I mean, isn't that part of the process that everything has to be official and buttoned up for the vote to count?
Sure, and we want the rules be followed, but at the end of the day, you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with volunteers working long hours, and the right to there's no question here, were these people fraudulent or were they, not doing anything right? And those aren't valid reasons to disenfranchise somebody vote. We're talking about one of the most sacred and fundamental rights that law has always said that's not a reason to disenfranchise somebody, and that's why I think our appeal will be strong.
All right, we should mention we've reached out to Mr. Mullen. He directed us to the Secretary of State Recount Commission. I've asked a spokesperson to respond. We've also reached out to the Copenhagen campaign as well and would love to have them on as well. All right,
Yeah.
we'll be in touch. Senator Deery, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.